So what if we told you that when we were looking for a homestead, that we ended up buying the least expensive and ugliest property of all the homesteads that we were looking at, and it was the best decision that we made? We're Jim and Joelle from Scratch Farmstead, and this is the story of how we found the perfect homestead for us.
Important when we have this conversation about buying a homestead to kind of start at the beginning, and that is what we wanted. And I'm not talking about how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, all those typical things that you think about when you're purchasing a homestead, but really what we wanted, and the reason that we were so drawn to this homestead lifestyle is our values and what we were going after really were a little different. So they were more like we wanted the freedom to raise our children at home and homeschool. We wanted the freedom to live with low cost of lifestyle and to be debt free and to live off of one not very big income. We wanted freedom of time and to be able to have time to work outside and build things and have a garden and take care of our animals and do that alongside our family. And so we were looking for a lifestyle that looked like these things, that had these things as our values. And so as we thought about purchasing a homestead, this is kind of the lens that we were looking through as we thought about moving our family to a homestead property. Is what's a place that we would be able to live these things out?
Yeah, so heading into it, we knew that piece of it, but it was still really tempting to focus on other things in our search. And so, for instance, the first property we put an offer on was a lot different than what we ended up with. It was probably about twice the cost of ultimately the 5-acre homestead property that we purchased and we live at now. It was 4 times the amount of land. It had a bigger home. It had a lot of great things, and it was still a really great value for that property. But it was also, I guess financially, it would have just been a totally different scenario for us playing out purchasing that property versus what we did purchase.
Yeah, I think we made spreadsheets where we kind of planned all these things out and figured, how can we make this work? Like, what can we juggle here and do this here to make this property be a reality for us? We spent a lot of time doing that.
Spent a lot of time working the numbers, and it was like we could have made this work, but it would
really trying.
Yeah, everything about it would have been a stretch, and it would have put so much pressure and so much stress into our world of trying to make, especially just the financial piece of it work out, and really those things we talked about, the values of just freedom of time, freedom of finances that we were ultimately seeking in this whole journey of purchasing a homestead, felt like they would have almost been impossible to really end up there at the end of that scenario of buying that homestead. So that property ultimately didn't work out for us, which looking back on, we're very thankful for, but that just kind of showed how easy it was to start going down that rabbit hole of really kind of looking above and beyond our means and then our values in this whole search process. And I think a big part of that is sort of this. We live in a culture of like the bigger is better mentality, and especially when it comes to land, I don't know if anyone else can relate, but that for me, that's like the big temptation. I think, man, I gotta have 20 acres or I gotta have 40 acres or more or whatever. And I think at the end of the day, like 5 acres or a lower amount of acres is totally fine.
Yeah, so we did end up putting an offer on that original house that on 20 acres, that was a really nice property, but ultimately it was a multiple offer sort of situation, and we were outbid. And we are grateful that we were outbid.
Yeah.
And so that didn't work out, and so we were kind of back to square one, and so we were coming about, every time we wanted to look at properties, it was about 4 hours away from where we currently were living. So it was a whole kind of big day trip sort of planned out thing. So we had a day planned that we were coming and visiting to look at a couple properties lined up. And the night before we were headed down, a new property popped up on realtor.com, and we were looking at it, and it almost looked, it's like they didn't want anyone to buy this property. It was a foreclosure. The pictures were ugly and awful looking. The description was super unhelpful and really gave no information and was not trying to sell the property at all. It just kind of said some very basic things about the property and the home, but really gave you no information. And so we saw this listing and we were kind of like, this is probably going to be super trashed and not worth our time. But it came up and it's in the location that we're looking at, and the price was much less expensive than any of the other properties that we were looking at. And so that was appealing. And so we're like, well, we'll add it to the list and we'll go check it out. And so we went that day and we saw a couple properties, and the other ones that we had all planned to see were totally underwhelming and pretty expensive, and there was nothing about them that they just weren't for us. And then we came to this other property that had the really bad description and pictures, and we came and it was ugly and it needed a lot of work, but we both came and just had this feeling of like, yes, like this place has so much potential. It has good bones to the house. It needs a lot of work. There's wallpaper on every square inch of the walls. There are no floors. The kitchen and really the whole home are straight out of the 1950s when it was built and had hardly been updated at all since then. But it was a solid house.
Yeah. And I think like most of our experiences in our home search were like kind of based on the pictures and description. They try and talk it up and it's like over promising, and then you get there and it's under delivering, and it's like just yeah,
you just kind of leave feeling like, well,
that
was not great.
worth our time, and wish we would have known some more details, actual like realistic facts of the property up front. This one was just a total opposite of that, and total surprise.
Our expectations were low,
really
and
low,
it actually was. I think pretty much for us, immediately we both had that kind of gut instinct of like, this is it. This is the property that we should buy.
Maybe even before we actually got in the house. I think we just walked the property for a bit and we were like sold on that.
At least Jim's all about the property.
Yeah, and then we got inside and it just got better.
I mean, it needed a ton of work, guys. Like this property, I mean, this house, it was ugly and it needed a lot of work.
And just to paint a picture, it was a 1950s ranch house, severely outdated, didn't have floors, needed a lot of updating just all throughout the house.
Hadn't been lived in for probably over a year or so.
It seemed like it hadn't been lived in, and so
there were some mice living in there.
Lots of wallpaper, like you said,
So it certainly wasn't glamorous, but the price made it so affordable for us. So when we think about how we were crunching the numbers and making spreadsheets in order to make that other property even be a consideration and work at all, this one was like almost half that price. And so we were not only able to afford it, but we were actually able to afford it and then have some to put back into the house, one, because we had to totally update it and make it livable for our family, but then also have some in savings for investing into the property. And when needs came up and we needed a livestock trailer, or we needed, to put fencing or whatever it is, we had that money left over and we weren't feeling totally strapped, like every penny is spent, and we could actually really live that lifestyle that we wanted. It gave us so much freedom. So ultimately, while we felt like that other bigger, better property was so great at the time, and we were just figuring out how we could possibly make this thing work for our family, but it didn't. And then this property came along that was really very, very different. The house was simpler, the property was simpler. Yeah, everything about it was simpler, and that has just been so perfect for us because that has given us the freedom to live out those values that we talked about at the beginning. The freedom of time and having more flexibility there because there's just not as much that it requires from us. The freedom financially to be able to live off of one small income and for me to be home and homeschool our kids, for us to have time and flexibility to work together as a family and do things on the farm and on the homestead. And so all of those pieces that we were really looking for, while we thought those were values, we thought, well, we can still make it work with this other home, even though we were going to feel totally strapped. We are really now seeing how grateful we are to have purchased actually well below our means and how that's given us the freedom to really live the lifestyle we want and even to really have the ideal home, because while it took a lot of work, Jim put a ton of work into this house, you guys. So we actually moved here. We bought the house right after we found out we were pregnant. And then he just worked so hard that whole pregnancy to get this house to be just so perfect for our family, and to now being really beyond anything we could have imagined. And because we had that extra income to do that, we had the income to make the house how we wanted it.
Or more the savings.
The savings, yeah.
From not
spending on more house.
Price range, yeah.
Yeah, to make this really dream home for us. And so that has been just
we still went about it in a really frugal way. Yeah. But the things that we really valued of when we wanted to buy something that was quality and we knew would last for our family, we were able to go ahead and make those purchases. Yeah. And so, anyways, and then I guess just to talk more too then about the size of the land piece of it, because that like I said, was a big deal for me. I had a hard time. I felt like I was settling for 5 acres that we ended up with, and looking back on it now, so we had a farmer friend, family that we got to know, and when I told him we were looking for a homestead, he said, "Jim, get a home on 5 acres and you'll be able to do everything you want there and you'll be happy." And I didn't believe him at the time. I didn't think that. I honestly didn't think we would end up on just 5 acres. It seemed like that was, less than ideal.
That was kind of a very, very minimum of what we were
I wanted at
looking
least
for.
10 or maybe 20 acres, and so that's where I was looking. And so this kind of seemed like, anyways, wanted to stay away from it. But honestly, 5 acres for us has been just the perfect size for a homestead. And in terms of what it provides, how we're able to feed our family off of it. We have a couple cows, we have chickens, we have room for some more animals in the future. We had some big garden areas, we planted an orchard. And we've been able to do some really awesome things and kind of transforming this homestead, making it exactly what we want
5 acres.
Want it to be. Yeah, you can do so much. And even just, the freedom it's given us to not feel like we need to invest a ton in equipment is a big part of it. Like, we don't have a tractor. I don't have any plans of getting a tractor. It just we don't need it on 5 acres. Certainly I could figure out a way to use a tractor, but we don't need it, and really, we're able to work with basic tools,
we haven't
equipment,
had to invest in a lot of really expensive things like that.
And so anyway, so 5 acres felt like settling, but it's been just right for us and for kind of all our ambitions
being
as
a young
homestead.
family that is has a full life and, you know, all
Yeah,
those things.
as
It's felt more doable.
beginning newbie homesteaders, 5 acres has been just right.
And there are other advantages too that we have seen that we didn't necessarily think about as much as with having a smaller home and a smaller property. Our property taxes are significantly less. Our utilities are significantly less. Like, there just aren't those added costs that you get from having bigger home and a bigger property. And for us and for our values and where we are currently at in life, that's perfect. And we are so thankful for that.
So if you're thinking of your next steps and maybe purchasing a homestead in the future, really, think about your values and get clear with you and your family so that you're all on the same page of what your values are. And let that be sort of the filter for all of your decisions with making this potentially really huge investment, both in time and just long term. If you're investing in a farm and a homestead, it's a big decision. It's a long-term thing, and you want it to be the right thing for you and for your family. So that's our advice, is just to get clear on your values, and don't let, like, you know, a bank pre-approval letter or something dictate how much you should purchase a homestead for, a house for. Get clear on those values. Let that be the criteria that really kind of paves the way for your criteria and ultimately the decision of what you end up with.
Yeah, so that is the story behind our humble little 5-acre homestead here, and why we are so thankful to be here and for this home and for this property. If you want to learn more about our 5-acre homestead and what we were able to accomplish over the last year, we have an awesome video for you next about how we were able to feed our family in our first year of homesteading on this 5-acre property. So we'll see you in that next video.